So those are the myths. Let's see how these myths lead to some pretty serious mistakes. I want to talk about some common mistakes people make. As we mentioned earlier, many people simply assume that it's too late to plan because their mom or dad has already entered the nursing home. Now, it's true that the sooner you plan, the more of your assets you can save. But we can typically save roughly half of your assets, even if you haven't planned. So you don't want to assume that you shouldn't seek help just because you waited too long or your mom or dad waited too long. Now, my mistake number 2 here is giving away assets too early. Sometimes people think, it's simple, I'll just give everything I own to my kids. Now, unfortunately, that can be a terrible strategy for both you and the kids. Let's say you decide to give $200,000 to your son, Bob. Bob can save the money for your needs as you intended, or he could use it for his needs. But I'm sure you're thinking, I don't know Bob. Bob would never do that because we trust him. What happens if Bob is in an automobile accident and it was his fault and other people are injured? That $200,000 you gave him are his assets from a legal standpoint, and that means that they're available for recovery in the lawsuit that Bob's going to be facing. Or if Bob gets divorced, half of it will go to his ex-wife, regardless of the fact that it was your money and you never intended that. You have to be very careful just giving money away. Let's assume that none of these potential problems concern you. If you give away all your money, how are you going to pay for the nursing home during the penalty period should you need it sooner than you anticipate? Also, will you have enough to pay the nursing home in order to get into the nursing home of your choice? With proper planning, these problems can be avoided. Mistake number 3 is ignoring safe harbors created by Congress. Someone once said there are 2 sets of rules, one for the informed and another for the uninformed. That's true. The Congress has provided many opportunities to protect assets, but you can't take advantage of them if you don't know about them. Just like there are many tax shelters and tax loopholes that are legal, there are also Medicaid loopholes that are, unfortunately, they've made them complicated and nuanced. So even if you have heard of some of them, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's obvious how to implement them correctly. Mistake number 4 is applying for Medicaid too early. Rule of thumb, never apply until you qualify. Do your planning, use legal strategies to shelter your assets, make sure you've met the rules for qualification, then apply, not before. So that takes me back to the example we talked about earlier. Remember when we spoke about giving away $1 million, okay? The gift of $1 million can cause an ineligibility period of 76 months, okay? By doing proper planning, you could cut that period to 60 months. So in other words, we would transfer the money, pay privately, and then apply, because the transfer will be out of the look-back period, so they won't be able to see it. So in other words, we give away the $1 million. We wait 5 years, and then we immediately apply. So they look back 5 years, they don't see the $1 million, they're not entitled to see the $1 million. So then what we get when we apply is no penalty period. So that what that did is effectively cut the penalty period that you could have had from 76 months down to 60 months. Now, there are other strategies we could do also to minimize the amount of penalty that we take, but that's just one strategy. The fifth mistake is failing to take advantage of protections for the healthy spouse. The healthy spouse, the one who stays at home while the other spouse is in the nursing home, has rights too. So you want to be sure to take advantage of them. For instance, the healthy spouse is entitled to keep a community spouse resource allowance. What that means is the community spouse or the healthy spouse is allowed to keep half of the couple's you add up all of the couple's assets, and the healthy spouse is allowed to keep half of those assets as her own without having to lose anything to the facility. Now, if half of the assets is less than $74,820, the spouse can still keep the whole $74,820. That's the minimum that the healthy spouse is allowed to keep. If they're more than $123,600, then that's the maximum the healthy spouse is allowed to keep. It's complicated, and probably the nitty-gritty of it is beyond the scope of this video. Now, the healthy spouse is also entitled to keep his or her own income up to a certain amount, and that amount changes each year. In 2018, it's $3,090. So if the healthy spouse's income is less than that amount, that spouse gets to take a portion of the sick spouse's income to bring her up to that amount. This is known as the monthly minimum maintenance needs allowance, MMMNA. We call it the MIMNA for short. So let's say the husband's income, for example, is $4,000 and the wife's income is $500. Now she's allowed $3,090, so she gets her $500, and then she gets to take $2,590 from the husband's income before his income has to go over to the nursing home. That brings us to mistake number 6, applying for Medicaid too late. As I hope I've made clear, the sooner you plan, the more you can save. Every month that you delay can cost you $18,000, which is a typical nursing home cost when the crisis hits. If you were unaware of the community spouse resource allowance, you may end up spending everything down to the Medicaid limit, not realizing that you were able to protect the healthy spouse by putting that money aside. Also, once someone's in the nursing home, even if he's eligible, if you wait more than 3 months to get sorted out and apply, you'll get stuck with some private pay. Let's say you go into the nursing home in June. In order for Medicaid to pick up starting, let's say, June 15th when you went in, the application must be received by the end of September. They'll only go back 3 months retroactive. And applying typically involves finding a lawyer, gathering 5 years worth of documentation, which always takes longer than anyone would imagine, giving the lawyer time to go through it all, put it all together, explain it, and file it. So if you know or that a nursing home is going to happen, or if you find that your loved one unexpectedly ends up being in a nursing home or a rehab, the time to seek help is immediately. Which brings me to mistake number 7, not getting professional help. Many people get their Medicaid advice counseling from a friend who went through a similar situation, or from somebody at the senior center, or someone at the job, or worse yet, someone with a financial interest who has something to sell you, like annuities, for instance, or some other vehicle. Don't do it. I promise you that whatever money you save by trying to handle these matters yourself will end up costing you thousands. Also, beware of making these decisions when you're emotionally distraught. The right help can save a very large portion of your life savings, if not all of it. And the last mistake I want to mention is being confused about lifetime liens on property and estate recovery. Unfortunately, the death of a nursing home resident is not the end of the Medicaid mess. Without proper planning, the heirs will be in for a nasty surprise when the state of New York becomes their co-claimant on mom and dad's estate. It's quite possible for the state of New York to get everything and for the kids to get nothing. For instance, let's take the house. No joke intended, but that's what the state might say if the home was left in the nursing home resident's name. The state may put a lien on the house during the Medicaid recipient's lifetime, but they can't enforce it until after the person dies, and then not until the community spouse dies, if there is a community spouse living in the home. If there is no such remaining person living in the home, the state will recover all of what it paid for the care from that person's estate, including the home. Now, remember what I said earlier. If the home was not in the Medicaid recipient's name, meaning if we did our planning ahead of time and anticipated eventual estate recovery, then the state would not be able to recover against it when the person dies. So I hope the takeaway from this video is the importance of planning for these things as early as possible in order to avoid losing your life savings to nursing homes. So that brings us to the end of this video. I hope that you've found it to be informative. If you'd like to discuss your own situation with me or the situation of a family member, feel free to call me at the number on this slide. I can schedule a telephone appointment, an in-office appointment, or a home visit. Now, if you have someone who's already in the hospital or in the nursing home who needs emergency planning, I can also meet with you at that person's room in the facility. I do a lot of that. That's what we call emergency planning. And if you need that type of situation, you should contact as soon as possible.